this town hall meeting. We were hopeful we could have had one sooner since the last time, but our schedules and with the holiday, we just weren't able to pull that together. So today's the day, and we're glad that all of you have been able to join us. Hope everyone has been able to stay safe. Seems like we're in the midst of this pandemic, and it's not going to let up anytime soon. So I think this is going to be a great opportunity for to have an update on the CARES Act and to anything that might have changed or any clarifications that may have come relative to the CARES Act and its relationship to local governments. If you've got any questions, this would be a great time to ask those questions. I think what we'll do is we'll start off by turning the time over to the staff at MACo, to Eric and Jason and whoever else might want to weigh in. And we'll give them a few moments to give you an update. And then we'll at the end allow some Q&A, some question and answer time. So with that, I think we'll just turn it over to Eric and Jason.
Thanks, Dan. I think Jason's at a somewhere public facility somewhere in Custer County, and so I'm not sure if he's going to weigh in, but we are going to try and put him on the spot for some specific questions because executing some social distancing for the last 2 weeks. I'm just back from a camping trip with my family, and I just got caught up on voicemails, and I have 723 emails that I still need to respond to, mostly from members that are on the phone and on the call. But Jason has held down the fort since I've been gone, and he's done a great job with it. So I'm going to jump right into the CARES Act portion of it, and then we can get into question and answer. If you recall the last time we met, and in correspondence that we sent out previously, we had been negotiating with the governor's budget office on the category of presumptively eligible employees that should be able to be reimbursed for wages and benefits. And as we last talked, we made a case to the budget office that presumptive eligibility included detention officers and 911 communicators, emergency services communicators. They had not agreed until I went on vacation, and Jason continued to work with them and finally got them to agree, at least on a limited basis, that they'll include as presumptively eligible your 911 dispatchers and your detention officers for the first phase of reimbursement, that essentially March 12th through the end of June. So we're encouraging all of you that have detention officers in 911 or in associations with cities or in a conglomeration of 911 communications centers to get together and fill out your requests in this next opening to get reimbursed for those actual costs. Governor's budget office is that they are allowing for, nor have they paid for, benefit costs, which in our position is clear. Treasury guidance is clear. The intent of the funding is clear that the employment costs include full benefits. So we're still asking you if you're interested to include the full benefit cost for those positions of that presumptively eligible category. I'm not sure what's going to happen in the future, both in terms of whether they're going to continue presumptive eligibility through the end of December, which is what CARES intends to do, or whether the governor's budget office is trying to hold money back for some unseen purpose that we can't get any clarity on right now. But I'm telling you, as of right now, your detention and 911 folks are eligible for reimbursement for that first period. And we will continue to advocate for those costs to be reimbursable through the end of December as CARES intends. There have been subsequent questions from things like hazard pay. The governor's office is not moving at all on that. If hazard pay wasn't in place at the time that you make the request for reimbursement, they're not reimbursing it. You can't do retroactive hazard pay for any category of employees that you think might be eligible. The state won't pay for those costs. And the state has been good about paying legitimate hard costs for pieces of equipment, PPE, anything else that's been legitimately COVID-19 related. Costs incurred and submitted for payment, the state's been pretty good. With the caveat that I know that some of you are frustrated. We've heard, I have not been back in communication all that long, last night to this morning, and I know that there's a lot of frustration about how that first round of reimbursement went, and I expect it to be smoothed out as we continue with the next 3 opportunities for reimbursement. And I'm asking for your patience in working through this process that the governor's office created. Local government services sort of got dumped on, and the grant process to disperse however much money they get out of that 1.25 billion to local government. So I'm asking for a little bit of patience, but I also want to know where the problems are and where I want to see copies of rejections if you think they're legitimate COVID-19 incurred costs. And we'll continue to advocate for a broad category of presumptively eligible personnel costs. And with that, unless Jason has something that he can add from his relatively public place, we'll take over for question and answer. But Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think I got a few minutes here where nobody's in here. I was going to be in the courthouse with Commissioner Stroff. I'll let him explain why I detoured away from there if he would like, but I think you could all deduce that they have a problem and deduce what that might be. A couple of things for those of you in the first round. Obviously, if you submitted for, or even if you didn't submit for detention or 911 officers, that changes your request because they've either approved or partial or denied your request or approved it all, but you didn't include your detention officers in your 911. I've asked them for clarification on how they're going to handle that. As soon as I get that, I will shoot that out to you. But I put that request in late yesterday, so hopefully we'll get some guidance. I hope for those of you that asked for those dollars, they simply submit a second payment to you. Eric's right on the benefits. They're still on the table. They're still negotiating. The state wants to see how much money we're spending. They have their own reasons, but they're just not letting that go. I have told them that I'm recommending to the counties that they ask for it. That I'm asking you to break it out into separate line items so that when they deny that particular part of the claim or reimbursement, you don't lose it all. The next round of openings should start next week. One of the complaints we got was that having a week to submit was not enough. That was something we didn't anticipate or hadn't really been talked about in our meetings, and they gave folks submit the documents. That's just not enough. They're going to give 2 weeks, so we'll have a little bit more of an open window. Because we finally just got this other piece negotiated yesterday, I imagine they will, sorry about the noise, open that up next week and give you 2 weeks to get it submitted. I hope that all of you are starting to gather that information. We can go right up through June 30th. If you didn't submit before, you start March 12th and go through that date. If you submitted through May 31st, you would pick up all your June expenses and anything you missed prior to June. Questions for me? The next deadline, I think, was July 17th. Expect an extension.
Great, thanks, Jason. So now we'll kind of open the floor up for questions. And what you could do is if you hover over your name on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a hand. You can click on that hand, and that will show Ashley or I that you have a question, and then we'll just call in order those as we see them, those hands. When your question has been responded to, if you could please then click on that button again for your hand and it'll go away. Otherwise, we'll keep coming back to you. You can also use the chat box if you would rather type out your question. And I see there's a question already there from S. Beggs. So the state disallowed detention on request check deposited today for what was allowed. Do I need to submit for detention and dispatch for March 12th through May 31st with new request?
Yes, when the next round is open.
I'm going to throw out maybe, because I'm going to see if they'll pay. That's part of the request I made last night was, how are you going to handle the folks that submitted for those dollars, but that they got rejected? So all the documentation has been submitted. You've asked for it. They know how much it is. Will they just pay that, or do you have to resubmit? And I'm hoping you, at the very worst, only have to put it on the spreadsheet, and that you don't have to recopy all of those payroll reports that you already did. So hold tight on that. I'll let you know. At the very worst, we'll resubmit for those same dollars with that same documentation for the July reimbursement.
Great. Let's go to Tracy Anderson. Tracy, you are unmuted.
Frank DePriest, Blaine County. Any word on the senior center reopenings or partial reopenings?
Commissioner, this is Eric. No, and we asked questions when we had our executive committee up there 2 weeks ago at the governor's office for clarity on senior center and congregate meal facilities. That was the day that the governor announced that there was going to be limited visitation in nursing homes, but we still have not received clarity from, I think what you're seeing is conflicting guidance from the area agency on aging versus the governor's office about what is allowed and what isn't allowed. Two of the staffers are supposed to come back and provide that clarity. I've not seen it unless Jason saw it while I was out.
Okay, thank you.
We'll follow up though.
Okay,
Nothing has come through.
We did have a couple other hands raised, but it looks like their questions got answered because they are not there. Oh, we have a new one. Diane McLean, you are unmuted. Go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Great. So we passed on the first information to our sheriff's office that, deputy sheriff's wages and stuff would be an allowable expense. And, he's indicated that he is not interested in applying for those dollars. And so I'm wondering if commissioners can apply for those dollars for those wages. He just feels like we didn't have budget costs that were extraordinary or above what we originally asked for. But I'm kind of thinking, gee, if they're going to let us have those as costs, then we definitely need to apply for that money. How do I handle this?
So, Commissioner, let me be real clear about the answer to this. Only the Board of County Commissioners can request the funding. And if you request it even as using justification, the incurred cost, the personnel costs for your law enforcement, your sheriff's office, it doesn't go back to the law enforcement or sheriff's office. It goes back to the general fund. If you receive it in with its tagged, identified federal number, get it into the general fund because you can use it for general purposes. And the reason that you might want to consider doing this is because if you receive, even a small or mid-size, or it doesn't matter, large county receives reimbursement for all the incurred costs for personnel, the base costs for personnel, you have decisions you can make in subsequent years about whether you levy the maximum amount of mills that you are authorized to if you've received a significant contribution from CARES Act funding to offset your ongoing operational costs. It's your decision to ask for it, and it's your decision on what that money can be used for. You could put it into capital, you could decrease your mill levies, you could, if you have a special public safety mill levy, you could not levy that maximum number for those cases, but it gives you the flexibility to do what you want financially on a go-forward basis. It's not the sheriff's decision to make that request, it's only the Board of County Commissioners.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, let's jump down to the chat box for a couple of questions. The first is there any reimbursement for staffing sent home during the March 12th through June 30 and not working but were paid?
No. Treasurer, this has been specific and clear all throughout the 4 different iterations. There is no way to pay for public employees sent home with pay. Now, the private sector, absolutely. There are at least two different programs that pay for that. But for the public sector, no, you cannot receive reimbursement for public employees sent home with pay.
And kind of a follow-up question, does that include those that were required to be quarantined due to potential exposure to COVID? Continue to pay them while they were out of the office.
It does include those. So there's there was different circumstances across the state about how counties treated potential exposures, quarantines, people leaving the county and coming back to work. And there's no scenario that I'm aware of where CARES Act funding can pay for those costs incurred for sending somebody home with pay for any reason as a public employee.
I would go a little further on that, including if a sheriff's deputy takes a vacation, that portion of vacation will not be reimbursed either, or sick leave. So if they're working and they take vacation, don't submit their time period in the dollar amount you request. Don't submit the time they were on vacation. They will reject that.
Okay, I believe that answers the next question that we had, which was, is there a conversation concerning paid time off, vacation, sick for reimbursement? So thank you, Jason. All right, let's go back up here and see if we have any more hands raised. Oh, I just heard another one. Sorry, it takes me a minute to scroll through and find you. There we go. Nicole, your line is open.
Hi. The county and the city have a shared interlocal agreement with our sheriff's department. And the city has applied for the deputies' wages to be reimbursed. And they only pay $100,000 a year towards a $700,000 budget. And they've requested that one full quarter, $25,000 be paid. The county has not submitted their request for payment yet. And how do we distribute that money? Like, we pay the majority of the wages, the county does. I want the city to see some sort of reimbursement, but I'm not sure how we split that up.
Commissioner, that's a tough one. And we've thought about this because you're not alone in providing law enforcement services for either incorporated towns or cities in your counties. Our best practice recommendation is that the county make the request on behalf of the entire law enforcement agency and then distribute the money as you see fit to, in your case, your town, which buys law enforcement services at a rate that you guys can negotiate. Since the city's already made the request, you just have to deduct what they're likely to get from your request so you can receive your full compensation and they can get the portion of it that they're eligible for. But ideally, they'd have waited for you to do it for them.
So Commissioner, just so I'm clear, they submitted county employees documentation for a city request?
Yeah,
They use the contract.
yeah. Well, actually, Eric, I don't know what they submitted. I just know that they submitted that the deputies' wages be paid. And their county employees, we pay the wages. They only pay $100,000 towards a $700,000 budget. So I knew the mayor was going to make that request, but I wasn't really sure what she was, how she was going to request that. And I got a call from Brandon from the Department of Administration, and he's needed to be answered. And I was waiting for this meeting because I was like, I don't know how to answer his question.
I think
Right now, go ahead, Jason.
I would suggest that request should come from the city to the county for a fair share of reimbursement based on what the county actually receives. And that request should not be going direct from the city to the DOA. It's not, like you said, that's your expenditure, not theirs.
I agree, Commissioner, and I don't think they'll pay unless you show actual paid payroll costs, and the city can't show that. Only you can.
Okay. All right. Thank you, guys.
Okay, we're going to jump back down to the chat box real quick, then we'll go back to speaker. Do you know if the LGE form will be significantly updated or changed for future submissions? As an example, our EOC incurred food costs, which is FEMA eligible, but there was no category where this cost fit well.
I anticipate there will be some updates to the notes that are on it, the dates, what's eligible, what's not. I don't think there will be much difference in the actual spreadsheet itself. If there's something that you don't think fits in a category, redline it and write over it and scan it in, and we'll figure it out.
And send it to us so we can help advocate for those specific things.
And also, if there's been a few commissioners that have been sending me things to shoot forward to DOA for sort of a pre-approval. There really isn't such a thing, but we're just saying, hey, would you pay for this? And they're saying yes or no. Know that when we get those answers, they come from DOA, but the real answer is coming from the budget office. And so and I have pushed back on one or two and said, I disagree. They've rejected them, and I've told them I disagreed. I've not pushed back on others, but if you want me to do that, I'm happy to. And if they reject it and you want me to argue some more, I'm happy to do
that. All right, let's go to Joe Charbonneau. Your line is open. Are you there? Well, I see also a comment in the chat from that user account. So let's jump to that. says, I understand that Colorado is allowing clerk and recorders to get reimbursed for digitizing some records to allow the public to see those records. Is that something Montana is looking at?
So I'll go back to the original guidance that started in May and has been consistent through unbudgeted COVID-19 response costs. And reasonable is the term the state uses. If you incurred costs that were unbudgeted to digitize documents or change your office practices, including additional staff that might have, I think those are legitimate COVID-19 response costs. So in a generic sense, yes, I think those should be eligible and I would submit those.
We had a request for a case management system by a county for county attorneys so that they could share things electronically amongst themselves with remote staff, and that got rejected. So my thought would be to send that to Eric and I and let us lead the charge on the argument for that in advance. But yeah, on true letter of the law from Treasury guidance, it should be eligible.
Okay, and another question, does the elected sheriff's salary qualify or is it only deputies and undersheriff?
No, the electeds qualify. There's no exclusion for elected officers. It's law enforcement in a generic sense.
Great. All right, it looks like we are caught up on both chat box and speaker questions. Oh, here's a new one. We've discussed using a venue at the fairgrounds to be able to have larger public meetings. But we would also need to set up video system for remote attendance. Would that be eligible for CARES funding?
I say yes, but I also say that's a pre-request before you incur a bunch of costs that you might not get paid back for. Let us run that one up the flagpole for you.
I have seen that some electronics on that line get approved, but if you know in advance, they're answering within a day or two generally, unless they take longer if they're going to reject it, is what I'm finding. And then if we're caught up on the questions, I would just add, for those of you that have diverted employees to substantially COVID-related activities, which is 2/3 of their time, if you can document 2/3 of their time, you get 100% reimbursed, but they are asking for timesheets. So have your employees write notes on their timesheets about what they're working on, and it's got to be at least 2/3 COVID-related. You do not have to submit that same documentation for the presumptive folks.
Okay, so yep, we're caught up on chat box and on the speaker. So if anybody has any questions, now is a great time to ask.
While we're waiting for questions to come, I'll do one quick update too. Those of you who have been paying attention to the interim committee in the last legislative session, that HJ 35 subcommittee is the one that they allowed citizens to participate on, and so the league and MACo both have a seat on that. We're in the draft legislation phase of that committee work right now, and so I've seen a working draft of a recommendation that MACo put forward that caps use of income tax, both personal and business income tax, at the full rate of inflation over the 3-year average, and diverts everything above that rate of inflation for the 3-year average into an infrastructure fund. So this might seem familiar because the legislature caps your ability to adjust your mills by half the rate of inflation. This gives them, the legislature, the full rate of inflation, and then diverts everything else into infrastructure. So we'll see how that goes. That's going to get mailed out to committee members, I think, today. And in the next meeting, we'll have a rigorous discussion about what it would look like to control the growth of state government by the rate of inflation, which should be an interesting topic of conversation.
All right, and we have another hand raised. So George, you'd like to ask a question?
Hi there, thank you. Were you able to get any clarification on the county ambulance services? So, Bighorn County, we have 3 ambulances, 24/7, 365. Are those funds reimbursable, like the public safety, public health, and whatever other business are 100% reimbursable?
I'm going to defer to Jason for the details on this, but Commissioner, absolutely. Those are first responders. I'd use the same argument for your ambulance service as I would for the dispatchers and for any ambulance services that has a relationship to a county. If you're paying for those costs that way. But Jason, I don't know if you've got any more detail. Unmute.
Yes, is the answer.
Yes. Okay. And then one more thing, am I still on? The businesses, I had one business ask me about so they were obviously denied the small business stabilization grant. And I asked for the email, but state told them contact your county. Are we allowing to do some sort of grant to businesses in our area or not?
Commissioner, although it's perfectly allowable, and I have other states that have that examples of use of those funds for their private entities in their counties, the state of Montana has not done so. You're only eligible to be reimbursed for incurred costs. So there's no opportunity for a county to receive money and grant it in any way to any other entity that didn't have a direct relationship to the county and have a direct incurred cost.
For whatever reason, they want to maintain that particular activity at the state level, assisting businesses. So I would have them reach out to the Governor's Office of Economic Development or Department of Commerce and find a way in there.
Along those same lines there, I've seen some correspondence in the last couple of weeks in other states that have similar models with the state of Montana for delivery of community-based mental health services. A regional approach, board of directors by county commissioners, partially funded by the state, partially funded by counties, but governed by elected officials at the local level. And
that was the 22nd.
There are a couple of states that have a way to get money to those community-based mental health facilities in terms of revenue. Something we absolutely should look at in Montana, both in decreased workload, shutting down of those facilities, the loss of revenue that puts them, they're always operating at narrow margins anyways, but finding ways to build up that social safety net of nonprofits that are tangentially related to counties, I think should be something the state considers as we move forward in use of CARES Act funding. And they've only spent, the last time I checked, about 40 million of the 1.25 billion that they've received. So keep that in the back of your minds too, how we can help prop up in terms of lost revenue, organizations like our community-based mental health providers.
All right, let's jump back to the chat box. We have several more questions in there now. Would the clerk and recorder's salary partially qualify, as we are already strapped with duties and now spend weekends and evenings keeping records and prepare the CARES request?
The rule of thumb for the state is, in terms of what could be considered a repurposed employee, if 2/3 of your time has now been diverted or directed towards the COVID-19 response. And your clerk, I know the clerk and recorders and the finance folks in counties have been inundated with keeping track of all this stuff, and it's not directly related to your duties. And so I think there's a portion of that you could claim for reimbursement. Just like if you hired I know there are a couple of larger counties that had brought on additional staff to help both with the timekeeping and the submissions. Those are eligible and legitimate COVID-19 response costs. So if you document it well, I would say yes.
I don't think you have to have diverted them for the entire time period. If you diverted them for a pay period at 2/3 time, submit for that pay period. 100%. 2/3 time gets you 100%.
Okay, I think that answers another question we have in there about, does 2/3 include when a finance person who is working on these reimbursement requests for, say, a 40-hour work week? So if they work on it for 2/3 of that 1 40-hour work week, they're eligible for reimbursement for that 1 week. Is that what you're saying, Jason?
That would be my interpretation.
Yes.
Just document those hours on a timesheet.
How about, would detention officers working at a regional prison be eligible for reimbursement, or just county jail?
We are only advocating for county incurred costs. So in my mind, it's only county jails. And this program is set up specifically for local government reimbursement. So I think, yes, county jails.
So commissioners from Dawson County, which is where I'm almost positive that question just came from, are those county employees?
Sure, let me see here. Let's open the line. I have the line open from the account that asked that question.
Commissioner Charbonneau?
Yes. Commissioner, can you hear us? He responded back in the chat, said yes. I believe yes
So-
to county employees.
My suggestion would be break it out, but submit them. Let's see what happens.
How about, would expenses to continue increasing our telework abilities be covered for reimbursement?
Generally, yes.
Just for clarification on the employees substantially diverted to COVID, we have a handful of employees that were pulled from their normal job duties to work our call center, work on business reopenings. Do the COVID hours have to be 2/3 of the entire time frame of March 12th to June 30th, or just the pay period? So I think we answered that, right?
Just the
Just
pay
the
period.
pay period.
Yeah, that will work just fine.
Okay. You mentioned you can be reimbursed for incurred costs. What is an example for incurred costs for the sheriff's office?
The ones that I've seen are increased costs for personal protective equipment. There was an example of a vendor that was doing extreme detailing of the law enforcement vehicles after an arrest. Anything that was COVID-19 related. So take out what your normal fuel purchase would be, what your wear and tear on vehicles would be. But if you're buying PPE or you're doing an extensive cleaning or anything that you can tie directly back to COVID-19, those are the examples that we've seen. Jason, I don't know if you got more concrete example.
Yeah, I haven't seen a whole bunch of examples of direct costs, but that would be, if you had to buy something that you otherwise would not have bought related to COVID, it's probably eligible.
Okay. Let's jump back up. Commissioner Briggs has his hand raised. Your line is open.
Yeah, I was just gonna, on the issue of the regional prisons, our plan is to submit all of it, and then we fully expect that when we do the reconciliation program with the state that occurs every year of actual expenses to determine if we owe them money or they owe us money based on the per diem, that will be taken into account. So I've just warned my sheriff's department that the state will want their piece of that back from what they pay for inmates being cared for.
You're absolutely right, Commissioner. And there's a chance that they will have they will have paid themselves already from their slice of CARES Act for those costs.
Yeah, I can't keep them from double dipping. I fully expect that they will, but I won't do it myself.
But they won't take the full amount, and some of those detention officers are assigned to county folks in the jails, and if you have a regional, you're probably accepting them from other counties as well. So I think you'll get credit for some of it.
Well, I said we're gonna file for all of it because we actually designate which employees work in which divisions of the jail. We're big enough that our detention officers who deal with state inmates don't deal with jail inmates. So we can identify that, and we will on the report. And like I said, I just expect we'll owe them back. And I also expect U.S. Marshal Service to come back to us for a refund. So assuming that the state pays us this, we're going to go ahead and set aside the funds that we think we owe those other entities so that we've got them to repay them.
Okay. Let's talk to, looks like the commissioner is under the Tracy Anderson account. I have your line open.
Thank you. This is Commissioner Plumage. The county doesn't have a lot of money for indigent burial. And so if there were deaths in our community, would COVID fund that? Would Is that possible?
Commissioner, I brought that up specifically in our first meeting with the budget office because I talked to a sheriff in a relatively small county early on, and they had that same concern. And it's not just a COVID death. So if you're the coroner or you're the public administrator, whoever you have in your county that's making the decision that authorizes an indigent burial, it could be because a family member wasn't working because of the phase 1 shutdown that made them eligible for indigent burials. I would submit all of them if you can directly tie it back to COVID-19, not the cause of death, but the reason for authorizing the indigent burial. Those are, in my opinion, straight and directly related to this pandemic.
Then do you think we should have have communication with the mortuaries in discussing this? I don't know if they would, for indigent, usually it's for cremation or for, I'm not sure what type of burial that would be, and if it would be something very basic.
So part of my concern early on was that we didn't want to, and the Montana Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association didn't want to advertise this as a venue. So we didn't go out there and proactively start teaching people how to do indigent burials that would be COVID-19 related. So I can't tell you, other than you guys know your local communities, reach out to those morticians, the funeral homes, whatever your process is currently in place to authorize indigent burials. Make sure that everybody knows that's in that chain that COVID-19 impacted indigent reimbursable expense.
Thank you, and I thank all of you, Jason, Eric, and Chantel. You've really assisted our county a lot. Thanks a lot.
Yes, we try.
All right, I have several hands up from folks who have already spoken. If you have another question, please leave them up. If you don't, if you could go ahead and lower them, that would be super helpful for us. We'll jump back to the chat box, and then I will go back through any hands that are still remaining up in the speaker portion. All right, so is there any discussion about a special session to put sideboards on state COVID-19 reimbursement and spending?
Jason.
I have not heard from anyone that I would consider overly credible that's going to occur. I've heard some rumors, but pretty quiet.
Okay. Have any counties to date received any CARES Act reimbursements from the state?
Yes. So 22 entities submitted in the first round. I think 16 or 18 were counties. And I think they had 8 of those entities yesterday that they were finishing up, trying to get money dispersed. Now they've cut several of the reimbursement requests. For example, Liberty got about half of their requests because they put benefits in there, they put work comp in there, they put dispatch. I think they had dispatch and not detention. So by the time the state subtracted all of that off, they got about half of their money. Now we'll be asking for those 911 dispatchers to be paid as well. But yes, they have been paid.
Okay. And maybe a related question. When I included benefits in my first submission, the DOA response told me to exclude benefits and resubmit the application. Has that changed?
If you included it lumped in the number with your wages, they are not going to go through and do the math. But if you broke it out, they should reject only that portion of your request, which is what they did with Liberty. Now, that's something that I pushed them for recently because I assumed they would just do that, but I assumed wrong, and I think they rejected some all fully. So shoot it to me, and if you have broken it out, I'm going to resubmit it for you and say this should be at least partially funded. I don't know who asked that.
Looks like E. Strickland.
Okay.
All right. And next one is, am I understanding that the sheriff department wages can be requested for reimbursement even if we do not currently have the virus?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And is the coroner funded by CARES as part of law enforcement?
If your coroner is part of your sheriff's office, maybe. If you have a separately elected coroner, I would say not. But you can convince me to make an argument for that if you want. They're a responder.
All right, I think that, go ahead.
For those of you that are, trying to correlate your sheriff's department expenses, et cetera, and getting fully reimbursed for your wages on those, don't be concerned about that. The feds have come forward and said, we're presuming that their jobs have changed significantly enough that they get reimbursed. And so whether you've had 1 case, 0 cases, or 100, it doesn't matter. It's presumed that their jobs have had to change significantly enough due to COVID that they're eligible. So take advantage of that, because frankly, right now on the horizon, there's no lost revenue replacement. So let's not leave that money on the table.
And a follow-up comment that came in, we were required to deduct coroner pay in our request. Okay, let's jump back up to our audio. Diane McLean, your line is open.
Oh, sorry, is my hand still up? That's me
okay.
bad.
Thank you. George, your line is open.
I'm good.
Okay, perfect. How about Joe? Let's see, is that on? There we go. Joe Charbonneau, your line is open. I'm not sure if we can hear you yet. Are you there? Seem to be having some audio issues with that account. All right, so I think that gets us caught up on all audio and text questions. So if you have any questions remaining, please ask now. Looks like you've answered all of our questions from that account we can't hear from. So they're doing a great job of asking in text. Thank you, guys. Here's another one. Does the definition of benefits include the employer cost of health insurance or just the regular payroll related expenses like taxes, work comp, etc.? So
the wages that are eligible include FICA, so Medicare and Social Security, the employer share. The benefits would include health insurance, so include that in the piece you break out. The one part that I'm worried about benefits that they might exclude because it's sort of a gray area as to whether it's a benefit is work comp. I think I'm recommending that folks ask for that and put it on their reports, but break it out even one step further. So you'll have wages, then benefits, then work comp.
All right, I think we've got them all.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us.
We have one more.
Okay.
S. Beggs, your line's open.
Thank you. This is Scott from Lake County. In my subsidiary schedule supporting my benefits, I'm breaking out FICA, work comp, unemployment, retirement, and health insurance. Is that adequate? And then putting it all in one line on their Excel form saying benefits.
I'm almost a little worried that that's too much up the door for them to reject something I don't want them to. So especially with the FICA, I'd like that to be in the wage. The employer share of Social Security and Medicare should be in the wage. And then the rest of that, if you want to break it out that detailed, that's fine. But it's probably more than necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Because you're submitting your payroll report, right? So they'll see all of that breakout if they get into your documentation.
All right.
Great. And can we include health costs that are covered by the permissive levy?
Is that question from Commissioner Briggs?
No.
The short answer is yes, and then you have to do a good job of reconciling what you're going to levy in subsequent years. The money that you levy for health can only be used for health, and if you get reimbursed what you've already levied for health, that money should go back into that health fund, i.e., you decrease your levy in subsequent years. But technically, yes.
Okay, now I think we got them all. Dan, I can turn it back over to you.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for participating. Thank you, Ashley, for facilitating that portion of the call. And again, to Eric and Jason for responding to these questions. We're assuming that this is still a valuable outlet for you based on the total participation. It seems like we had 47 to 50 participate today. And so we'll go ahead and continue to schedule these as long as there is an interest. So we'll be coordinating with the MACo staff on selecting another date. We'll hope to pick something in the next couple of weeks. So be watching your emails as they come. Anything else for the good of the order from Eric or Jason before we sign off?
Thank you all for joining.
Great. All right. Well, we'll be sending out an email, and this has been recorded. And so as soon as we receive the recording, we'll send that out to everyone as well. It'll be posted both on the Local Government Center website and the MACo website, and we'll let you know when that comes out. So thanks again for participating, and we hope to see you in a couple of weeks. Have a good day and stay healthy.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, all.